you did mention earlier in your example that, you're learning a new skill. You reach out to me because I might happen to know something about that. That's a really nice segue into our next discussion point, which is why is having access to subject matter experts so critical to closing skill gaps?
It's tempting to say anyone can learn something just by taking a course or by figuring it out or by experimenting. But it often takes longer to learn something. And I think sometimes we've seen that in our own experiences. I always use the example of public speaking as something that is really easy to see some of these different elements, right? I can take a public speaking class. I can read a book about becoming a great speaker. But what's really helpful to me is watching TED Talks because I'm watching someone who's really good at this do it. And that helps me see not only how to do it well, but different ways of doing it well. So one of the things that subject matter experts help you do is take that learning, that theory, and show you how it actually works, show you different ways that they have tried to do it, and help you see how you might do it differently yourself. Because all of us, I think, develop our own styles of things. So I don't speak the same way Barack Obama speaks, but we both speak for a living. And so I think it's really important to be able to contextualize that skill with how I personally apply and deliver it. And the best way for me to do that is to see different people who have expertise and how they approach it. The same is true in sports. And I think we know some of these things intuitively when we look at sports. So if you were going to learn to be a basketball player, you would hire a coach who was a subject matter expert to help you get better at that. If you were going to learn to play golf, you could only get so far by doing it yourself. At some point, you need someone who's an expert to correct certain aspects of what you're doing, and that's what helps your learning process progress. So I do think having subject matter experts is really important. With that said, it's also something that companies struggle with because those are the most highly valued people in many cases to do the work. And so if you have a subject matter expert and then they're spending half of their time supporting or mentoring or teaching people, they're not spending half of their time doing work. So you could look at that as an inefficiency. Oh no, we have this person and they're only efficient 50% of the time. But if they're lifting 10 other people up who are then going to become your next subject matter experts, and you're making those 10 people that much more efficient and effective in their learning process, then that's actually a great investment of their time. But I think a lot of companies don't do that math. They just look at that time as either lost time or they just make it additive. So they tell that subject matter expert, yeah, do your whole job 100% and also support these 47 people over here who are learning. And that's just not sustainable. So there's a time element there as well.
I think it does become inefficient though when it's always like one-on-one, like mentoring and aspects with other employees. What do you think companies can do to like change that from subject matter expert to one mentee, one to many learning transfer?
There's a couple of ways to do that. So one way I mentioned before is this idea of a community of practice. So if you have 10 people who are learning the same skill and you have one subject matter expert and they have some sort of structured way to ask questions, share information, then you start to stretch that one-to-many relationship in a more efficient way. The second way, and this is where technology can be helpful, is let's imagine that subject matter expert is doing something and they know that it's something that these folks are trying to learn because they've heard from them. So maybe they do a quick screen recording using a technology and they voice it over and they say, this is what I'm doing. This is why I'm doing it, right? And then that becomes an artifact. It becomes a piece of content that's useful for a lot of people. And it reduces the questions that come back to that subject matter expert. So it is about finding ways to make that interaction more efficient. But it is also important to make sure that there's that human to human interaction there, because if you get too far away from that, it starts to become harder for people to connect to and understand what they're trying to figure out.
It sounds like a really good balance there, right? You have this artifact that is around, it's available for people who aren't necessarily like maybe in the same time zone, or maybe come to the team after that subject matter expert has been there a while. But at the same time, just being able to reach out and ask questions and say, hey, I saw this video you did, or I was looking at the code you wrote, going back to like that public speaking, example, right? And your style is completely different. I'm intrigued. Not only is it different, maybe it's more efficient, can you walk me through that example? Because it's not how I would approach it. So,
Right. No, exactly.